Hi there. This is 21 and 21, a rapid-fire Q&A show filmed at Presidio Bitcoin, the Bay Area's first Bitcoin co-working and event space. I'm Haley Berkoe, and I ask guests who stop by Presidio Bitcoin 21 questions in 21 minutes. We do our best to get through them all, but it's okay if we don't. Our guest today is Shehzan Maredia, the CEO of Lava, a non-custodial solution to borrow against Bitcoin. Shehzan, I have my stop clock right here, and it's ready to go. When I hit the button, it's go time.
Alrighty.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do this.
Let's do it.
So what brings you into Presidio Bitcoin?
The grand opening event yesterday.
What are you working on right now?
So you briefly mentioned it. Lava is a secure and simple way to borrow against Bitcoin. So as Bitcoin is adopting, most people holding Bitcoin don't want to sell their Bitcoin because most of us are bullish on the price of Bitcoin. And historically, one of the ways that you can avoid selling your Bitcoin but still get access to liquidity for spending or purchasing is borrowing against Bitcoin. And a couple of years ago, there were a lot of solutions that enabled borrowing against Bitcoin, but all of them were custodial, meaning that you had to give them full control over your Bitcoin. And these companies, they took your Bitcoin and they started trading it, meaning they rehypothecated it and they all went bust. So Lava, we've built a non-custodial solution to borrow against Bitcoin that leverages DLCs, discrete lock contracts, which are effectively a way to do smart contracts on the Bitcoin blockchain in a very secure way. There's no bridging involved. They're formally verified, so there's a lot less technical risk. And we leverage DLCs to offer Bitcoiners an ability to lock their Bitcoin and securely get dollars against their Bitcoin to spend. And this means as a Bitcoiner, you can avoid selling. You can still have exposure to the price of Bitcoin, but still make the purchase that you want to make.
Can you expand on why this is important to Bitcoin's future?
I think that Bitcoin's in the phase of adopting today as a store of value. One day it will be adopting, before it becomes a payments asset, it needs to be generally viewed as a savings asset. And one of the most important things that people do with their savings is borrow against them. The securities backed line of credit, so people borrowing against their equities, is a massive market. I'm from India. One of the main things people do there is they save in gold and they borrow against their gold. Gold never really became a currency. It always did as a savings asset. I think one day Bitcoin could be a payments asset, but it has to at least monetize more. And during that time, you can actually accelerate the adoption of Bitcoin by effectively shorting fiat, because you're holding on to Bitcoin, borrowing fiat at low rates, and spending that fiat.
So how did you become a Bitcoiner?
I've been into Bitcoin for like 10 years. I think it was almost inevitable that I would find Bitcoin. So I was born in India. In India, people spend in their local currency and they save in gold, and there's a decent amount of distrust in institutions. I moved to America when I was 7. I moved around a lot growing up, and my parents were also immigrants. So they were spending a lot of their time working really hard. So I was always interested in this concept of money, how we use it to organize resources in society, how people should store value in it. And I think inevitably anyone interested in those questions is going to find Bitcoin. And so I did too. And I was fascinated with it from a technical perspective, not just the product itself, like the monetary aspects of it, because I'm also from a technical background. And then I was just like mesmerized by it. And I think everyone who's probably listening to this went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole at one point, so they get it.
What are you currently most excited about in Bitcoin and why?
I'm really excited about the use case that we're serving. We've had a ton of demand from people who have historically had their Bitcoin and want to make purchases, but really don't want to sell it. And so it's like really cool to see, especially as people have been using it over the last year. Since Bitcoin's price has appreciated, we've actually saved people a lot of money since they borrowed instead of sold their Bitcoin. So that's been really like inspiring to me and our team, and just building like really secure and non-custodial way for people, not just in America, but the entire world to access it is really important to me. I think that's one of the powers of non-custodial technology outside of security that makes it so powerful, is that it can be accessible globally from day one.
What do you think is the most Bitcoin project in Bitcoin right now?
Probably Bitcoin Core.
So let's fast forward to a grim future, and Bitcoin has failed. How did it fail?
That's tough. I think a lot of things are going right for Bitcoin today. I think if people, I think the biggest risk to Bitcoin is central banks doing a good job. Because if they do a perfect job, maybe there's like some AI governance of central banks involved. It's a risk to Bitcoin because Bitcoin's a hedge against central bank failure. But humans are quite fallible, so that's where it's happened.
How do you think that we can mitigate that risk?
Oh, central bank failure or Bitcoin's failure?
Well, central bank's failure to Bitcoin's failure.
Interesting. I think there's a lot of things that we're doing correctly right now. So I think one, making sure Bitcoin Core is like a reliable code base, making sure people, run nodes, enough people, making sure mining doesn't get centralized. Because if mining gets centralized, then Bitcoin's also a failed project as well. That's a pretty decent risk to Bitcoin. Making sure that there are easy enough ways for people to get Bitcoin, to hold it in self-custody, to use it. Making sure there's decent enough education about Bitcoin, so that people who need it know that it's available for them.
So as we know, Bitcoin is quite volatile. How do we get people to use Bitcoin more as a currency despite this volatility?
I think it's tough today to get people to use it as a currency. So actually, I was mentioning to you before this started that I actually started Lava initially with the goal of making Bitcoin currency application, right? So making it easy for people to send Bitcoin in a non-custodial way and receive it. But the volatility is definitely a struggle for people, especially people not in America and not living especially people that are living like paycheck to paycheck, because they need some stable currency that they can like transact in without worrying about their price, their value that they've stored severely depreciating. I actually think that's why I'm really bullish on Lava, because we just let those people still save in Bitcoin and then borrow a local currency or fiat currency that's stable, but they still have their Bitcoin in self-custody that's stored securely. They're getting the price exposure to it. They're helping adopt it, and they're just shorting fiat. So I think that while I think there's like a lot of importance in building non-custodial payments applications, I think that it is okay today if they don't get enough adoption because the time for them is not today.
What's your most controversial Bitcoin opinion?
I think that there is probably, okay, I'll say this. I don't think I don't really care about the strategic Bitcoin reserve. Yeah.
What's your dream project that you would love to see other Bitcoiners build?
I think people are building like the right things right now. I'm pretty optimistic.
Well, that's great. What's your perfect Sunday?
My perfect Sunday. I'll just give you the Sunday I have. I usually get up on Sunday. It's a good way to start the week. So I'm usually working, hanging out with my girlfriend in the morning, working out. I think like making it really like relaxed, slow is nice.
Slow is nice.
Yeah.
What's the best way for companies to support the Bitcoin open source ecosystem?
I think that donating maybe their time, or if they have great developers, is the best way.
Do you think that institutional investment plays a role in whether Bitcoin becomes the planet's preferred currency?
I'm not that interested in institutional investment into Bitcoin. I'm really interested in Bitcoin's ability to democratize access to like a bearer asset for individuals. Because this is going back to my point why I'm not interested in the strategic Bitcoin reserve. Gold kind of exists. Governments can easily employ like guards and use guns to protect their gold reserves. Institutions, they're basically given power to, like companies are given power to by the government. They don't really exist if the government tries to take away their power, right? But individuals, it's hard for an individual to hold massive amounts of gold. I saw this in India, even a lot of cash. And I think that's where cryptography plays a part in democratizing access to the sovereign bearer asset. You actually can make sovereign individuals now because of Bitcoin. So I'm really interested in that instead of this institutional adoption or even nation state adoption theme.
What do you think the role of stablecoins should be?
So Lava, we do a lot with stablecoins as well. I have a few takes. I'm actually concerned about stablecoins on Bitcoin because there's this concern. It's a concern for Ethereum and Solana and all these other chains, but they don't really care to be decentralized. That if there's a lot of economic activity happening on Bitcoin with stablecoins, the stablecoin issuers, which are effectively given power to by the government, can have very strong influence over fork choice. I'm not going to say that they're going to control Bitcoin fully, but they're going to have extremely strong influence over fork choice, which is why when we started Lava, I knew that we would need to let people borrow against their Bitcoin and get a stablecoin. But instead of building on the stablecoins on Bitcoin, we developed a totally different network for these stablecoins. All the stablecoins on Lava are fully backed one-to-one by dollars in bank account. It's basically just a new technology to move dollars. The way I kind of think about it is stablecoins compete with commercial banking. Bitcoin competes with central banking. So I think that they're like totally different use cases. And I don't think that there's much relevance to Bitcoin the network with stablecoins because they're a complementary but very different technology.
What's happening today that gives you the most hope for Bitcoin's future?
I think a lot of things. Like I think Bitcoin is very interesting because there's so many problems to solve in Bitcoin that people of various skill sets can be useful for. So like there's educational problems, there's technical problems, there are, and in terms of even the technical problems, there's like software engineering problems, there's like problems related to maybe like electrical engineering. There's lots of like very interesting problems to be solved. And I think that we have the right people solving them. So I feel pretty good about where Bitcoin's headed.
How many Satoshi t-shirts do you think Jack Dorsey owns?
7.
7? I know the right answer, but you'll have to listen to the pod with Jack to hear it. Who are some of your favorite Bitcoiners in the Bitcoin space right now?
Actually, probably my favorite Bitcoiner is maybe Greg Maxwell. I met him yesterday. But he's definitely been inspiring, like technical leader for Bitcoin, or visionary. It's cool to see him yesterday too.
How do we convince the ordinary people, like the moms and dads, that Bitcoin is in fact safe?
I don't know if that's the right time to convince them. I think that I think people will find Bitcoin as they need it. And I think today, the average person in America doesn't need Bitcoin as some other people in the world do.
What advice would you give to people who are either new to the Bitcoin space or thinking about jumping in?
I think there's a lot of perspectives and philosophies in the Bitcoin space. And some of them are contradictory to each other. So I think it's worthwhile to really take a step back, listen to all of them, and try to understand all of them. And then always keep exploring and trying to like question your perspectives.
So this is our last question. You've done a great job with time. If you could leave our listeners with a single thought about Bitcoin, what would it be?
I think that's a good question. I think that they should definitely self-custody their Bitcoin if they're not already doing so. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the pod. Where can our listeners find more about you?
So Lava's website is lava.xyz, and we're also on Twitter. I'm also on Twitter as well. Just my name, Shehzan Maredia.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the pod today.
Thanks for having me.
Feel free to come by Presidio Bitcoin whenever you'd like.